with an anticipated completion date that tentatively falls within the first quarter of 2025, the Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano gas pipeline, a 614-kilometer long natural gas pipeline being developed by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, holds immense promises for Nigeria's gas master plan, covering domestic utilization and national sufficiency, as well as expanding the prospects for export. We're talking about huge dividends here for Nigeria's natural gas subsector, both locally and internationally. Let me bring in my guest so we can get into all of that, the gains of this massive infrastructure project and what it means or could mean for the country's economic growth. Olabode Showumi is a member of the African Business Roundtable, and he has consulted for the group since 2006. He also consults for the House Committee on Power and the Senate Committee on Gas. I'd like to welcome you so much to Insight. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nigeria, of course, has the world's 7th largest gas reserve, and that makes a lot of people, think that we are a gas nation. Actually, we are a gas nation, as it were, even though oil has been our major export for decades. But then, let's look at the AKK project and the fact that it is nearing the finish line based on the first quarter 2025 projection done by NNPC not too long ago. Is it therefore okay to say that we're fast leaving the realm of speculation, especially when you link the progress being done or being made, on the project to Nigerians' intention to shift from crude oil dependency towards a more diversified economy?
Okay, so when we talk about gas, it would be nice for us to maybe do a few steps back to look at how we got into where we are. For many decades, all over the world, gas was a poor cousin of oil. In fact, people used to be unhappy when they discovered gas. And over the years, more uses was found for gas. And one of the first projects for that was with the Nigerian NLNG, which was in the late 90s, where we had 30, 40-year contracts for our gas. So the gas was no longer being wasted, it was being supplied. Another project that came up in that line is the Escravos gas to liquid project, this EGTL, which basically transforms gas into liquids. In this case, you have diesel, you have naphtha. And so those were some of the purest diesels that were possible. And what now happened was that there was a bit of economic downturn with the low prices of oil, and that affected gas, which now means it affected the revenues that could come in from gas. But it was discovered that given our own market, given Nigeria as a situation, we actually have the capacity to actually consume our own gas, to do trade in within ourselves domestically. And so they came up with a plan for us to use gas, to utilize gas. And that's what is known as the Gas Master Plan. The Gas Master Plan anchored on 4 primary areas: gas to power, gas-based industries. So those are industries that use gas as raw materials. You're talking about fertilizer, you're talking about methanol, and the rest. You're talking about LPG, which is, of course, your cooking gas. And you have gas in industry. So in the industries that use gas to fuel their machines and the rest. So those were the 4 anchor points of that. But for you to get those things in within country, there was a need for infrastructure. And some critical infrastructure points were made, one of which is the OB3. The other is the AKK. The AKK, as it is being constructed, as it is being structured, is the backbone of gas infrastructure in Nigeria. More importantly, it is also the pipeline that will connect with the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline when it's eventually done. So it holds many things. Apart from it being an anchor point, or an anchor backbone structure, it is also positioned to enable industries all over. People need to remember that when ELPS, that's the Escravos Lagos pipeline,
yes,
when it was being constructed, there was only one off-taker, and that was EGMI Power. Right now, along that corridor, there's no more space. So what it means is that when you build infrastructure, you actually provoke, you actually push industries to come up. And there is evidences of that already. when the construction was being done, the governor of Kaduna then, El Rufai, set up a committee to come up with industrial parks, about two of them, and had a meeting with the project team, such that there will be a connection from where the pipeline passes through Kaduna to those places. So we're already talking industries in terms of conception.
I like that you've raised the Estravos Lagos pipeline, and I mean, you've talked about what Kaduna as a state now is doing with regards to the AKK. I am sure that experts like yourself are visibly, I mean, euphoric, or let's say excited over the progress being made, you know, towards gas utilization and sufficiency for Nigeria. And even now, as it has become a priority for the government. The AKK, of course, like you've said, you've referenced already, is a subset of the Trans-Nigeria pipeline project. You mentioned the Escravos to Lagos pipeline system. You talked about the OB3 gas pipeline. With all that has been happening so far, I mean, I wonder how and what states, whether directly impacted or not at the moment, you know, by these new gas infrastructure, can begin to do on their own to key into the TNGP. First, to drive their energy sector and perhaps fast-track industrialization in their states. I know you've mentioned Lagos and Kaduna. That's why I'm just doubling down on this.
So in terms of energy, I mean, if we take a cue from Dangote, he basically built his own power plant. So, and what he has built for the refinery, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 megawatts, is close to what Lagos State itself is using, if not more. So the point is that once you have the pipeline based on gas to power and all that, which actually has a lower rate than all the other forms, you can actually build your own power plant and use the industries as off-takers. So the power plant can be constructed pari passu with whatever industries is being done. And this is where states can take initiative. It's not necessarily only the states that it passes through. It's also the states that are near to it.
Yes, neighboring states.
So you have Benue is close by. Yeah. You have Bauchi is somewhere there. You have Castina somewhere there. You have Jigawa. You have Niger. You understand? So we are talking about basically the whole country. So when we say it's the backbone that passes through the whole country, it is not a guesswork. It is actually a fact. So there is nothing that says another state, say even Taraba, cannot decide to construct a 100-kilometer pipeline close to those places, do it in collaboration with NNPC or NGMC, and set up a group of industries there. There are already industries that are peculiar to every
earlier
terrain.
when I said we're fast leaving the realm of speculations, that's where we're fast leaving that realm, right?
Yes, we are fast leaving that realm. So, but this is where we are not yet where the baby has been born.
True.
We are now where there's a need for initiatives. Because there is the perception by many people that everything must be settled before they come up with your own idea. It's not true. There's nowhere in the world, there's no industry, and there's not even in personal life where that takes place. When you graduate from the university, you first take an initiative in terms of where you want to work. You speak, it's not necessarily your course. You have some time of meditation, some time of thinking, you consult with people, and then you start to apply, and then you look for jobs. So the idea that government will just develop everybody's life is a myth. It is the lazy man's approach to blaming something. So there is a need for people to take initiatives. In this case, when I say people, I'm talking about governments, whether it be local government, whether it be state government. Because really, the way the constitution has been set up, the new laws have been set up, nobody's without an excuse. So if the state government in whatever state, maybe Taraba, maybe Adamawa, is not moving forward, there's nothing that stops a local government from setting up an industrial park. Nothing that stops them from building their own power plant. Nothing that stops them.
Like what Kaduna is actually doing somewhere around there with the industrial park.
Yes. And there are many other states. Oyo too has done something, and he has done it in direct negotiation with Shell, away from all the government plans. They are not even connected with AKK at all. They are building their own equivalent of AKK across the whole of the state. So it is all about initiatives. And there is enough in terms of potential for you to leverage upon. So it's not like you're going to be working on nothing. You are going to be working on some foundations, which is now going to be dependent on the responsibility of the people who are leading to take the initiatives. Then other people will follow.
Great. I'd like for us to just take a step back and again go to this issue of the gas to power initiative, which of course is an entire is an entire value chain. I mean, and that's on its own is a whole conversation, on its own. I am however intrigued at the prospect it holds for the sector, but not just as an alternative to fuel power plants. And I mean, government is already touting AKK as having the potential to improve power generation, as it were. But I am more interested about the dividends and what it holds for the end users, people like you and I.
Okay,
yes, do you envisage that the gas to power value chain could truly and ultimately benefit the end users, especially households and businesses, as a cheaper alternative at least?
I don't know whether it will be a cheaper alternative. It's an alternative, all right. Whether it will be a cheaper alternative will be an issue of the dynamics of economics. It's going to be an issue of the alternatives that are available, because for now, the strongest competition anybody will have in terms of power generation is hydro. Okay. And primarily because you don't pay for the source material as it were. For gas to power, you need to pay for your gas,
True.
Whichever way. I'm not sure anybody is going to charge you within that kind of limits for River Niger, the water coming from River Niger. So there are some things that are just fundamentals of economics. But for me, what holds the biggest opportunity for benefiting the man on the street is gas-based industries. Because you see, what UNIDO had done about 7-8 years ago, which was lying fallow, was that they came up with a concept of the fact that you can have a cottage industry based on gas in every of our local governments, 774 of them. In simple terms, so if we go to Potiskum or somewhere, and we find out that in that place they have a lot of mangoes, and most of the mangoes, of course, as in the nature of those places, they go rotting and all that. Why don't we set up a mango processing plant there that is going to be fueled by gas? And on the strength of that, every mango that comes there is processed into fruit juice. Obviously, we will not be able to consume it, which means that we need to export it. So you can imagine some local government in faraway place, after all the structures have been put in place, they have some contract with a few people that need to use mangoes for some kind of raw material, and every month $50,000 is coming into that local government that is independent of oil, independent of federal government revenue. If you have, even if it is $10,000 coming into each local government every month, independent of oil, what you are talking about is a revolution. I mean, 10,000 times 774, you do the maths. And this is not connected with. What it means is that a lot of our people who are trying to kill themselves in the cities, who are sweating, who are living under subhuman conditions, can have reason to go home.
True.
They can have reason to contribute, because there is now an economy within where they came from that can meet their needs. And development, being in the city is not the same thing as development. Development is actually setting basics, and you find that when you go to the Western nations. So you can have all the fundamentals that you need for a comfortable life in the rural area, and then people can live their normal lives, and we can talk about even development in Nigeria. So for me, gas-based industries is the key.
And I agree with you entirely with regards to the impact on gas industries and what it's likely to do on the end users. But let's quickly double down, because I understand we've gone almost halfway with our time and our conversation. I'd like for us to just hurry along real quick. I know we're doing things already, stuff with compressed natural gas in Nigeria with what we're doing with vehicles. But I'd like for us to talk about the rising global demand for cleaner energy sources and how gas itself fails to completely meet the yearnings of environmental advocates who, of course, want lower carbon emissions. I wonder how Nigeria's gas master plan factors that issue amidst this intense global advocacy. Or is it a case of delaying actions as far as we're smiling to the bank, or is it a case of having a fail-safe in the event of a global energy meltdown or something?
Okay, so there is...
You chuckled there.
I chuckled because there's an aspect of it that is economics,
okay,
and there's an aspect that is politics, the global geopolitics of energy. Renewable energy, sustainable energy, as we know it, is actually not new. is more than 100 years old. There's no
Sure.
aspect of the energy source that we're talking about that is even relatively new, whether it be hydrogen, whether it be this. I mean, Albert Einstein, died in the 50s, but he did many great work. I mean, the atomic bomb, but he won the Nobel Prize for his work on the photoelectric effect. So photoelectric effect is the science of solar panels. That was what he won his Nobel Prize for, I think in 1920 or something. So the solar panel as we know it today is more than 100 years old. It's not novel, it's not new. So if it has not caught up at the rate with which we expect it to cut up in over 100 years, there are obviously some reasons behind it. So when we talk about the demand for sustainability, there is the science. The science is the fact that the way we currently use energy, we cannot continue to use it that way in the sense that we are going to damage the planet. But there is also the pressure to get, instead of us doing it in a more gradual way, there's the pressure to get it done with suddenly. And when you take a step back and look at the dynamics, you will find out that there are certain nations who are more on the edge of let's get this thing done tomorrow.
Okay.
And there are those who are not. Usually those who are more on the edge are those who lack some of these resources. And there is the thinking that it's kind of like an opportunity to ensure a leveler. Whether that is true or not is the nature of politics and conspiracy theories. But let's look at what is in the basics. The basics is that when we talk about energy neutrality, there's really very few things, if any, that is completely energy neutral. So because, for example, today we talk about the electric vehicle and all that. But the electric vehicle, when you look at in terms of the net carbon emissions that it brings, can be a lot more punitive to the environment than even oil. Because there are certain rare metals that goes into a battery. We're talking about lithium. We're talking about cobalt. Have you seen a lithium power plant, a lithium mining site before? It is more destructive to the environment than anything oil can do. You understand? And then there are certain things that are still connected with there are some part of the solar cells that are plastic. Plastic is 100% oil and gas. They are from petrochemicals. You understand? And then when you look at what oil does, it's not just about transportation, because we look at transportation and all that. It's a lot more than that. So there are over 10,000 products that currently exist today that are direct products of oil.
Sure.
From your jerseys, the women's hair, the cosmetics industry, even some pharmaceuticals, the coal tar on the road which we would drive,
sure,
the roofing tars. So they are over. So oil is not just
there's absolutely no writing of gas for now.
Not in this generation. It can be in the next generation. Because you see, this part of it is that there can be alternatives, but those alternatives must be economically sustainable and commercially competitive.
True.
Nobody is going to take, no business person is going to take a product that is more expensive than what he's currently doing just to satisfy certain demands. But we, in our own line, as Nigeria, we have done our best to meet it. That's why we came up with the decade of gas. The decade of gas is an answer saying that energy transition is real, but we have chosen gas, which is the cleanest form of all the fossil fuels, as our own method of meeting the needs of the energy transition. So basically, we are trying to align with the global records, the global demands and the global thinking, but we are trying to do it in our own way and in a way that is justifiable. Because in the first place,
yes,
we are not even we didn't contribute 1% of the carbon emissions that was emitted all over the world. In fact, Africa contributed less than 5% of it.
I understand we're totally out of time now, but if it would be possible in just 60 seconds or maybe 90 seconds, if possible, there's a security component to this whole discourse, to the AKK project I wanted us to talk about. I'm sure you're aware that several lives have been lost in the course of the AKK project arising from attacks at the project sites by criminals. Yes. We know these lines will flow about 2 billion standard cubic foot of gas daily, if I'm not mistaken. How do we avoid the mistakes of the past and even maybe the present with, of course, what we know is ongoing with oil pipelines in the country? How do we boost the security component of the gas master plan to circumvent what could easily become, another reign of gas pipeline vandalism in Nigeria?
So there are certain things that are cultural and social, and there are certain things that are legal. You, for example, you cannot legislate brotherhood.
True.
There's no law that can force people to be friends.
Again,
So when it comes to some of these basic security things, we need to inculcate it in our culture that these are national assets and these pipelines flow to the benefit of our interest. If we cannot convince ourselves, and we cannot convince our brothers and our people in the villages, and we cannot convince the man on the street, there's no law, there's no security agency that can do that. Because you can only have so many security agencies manning so many people.
Sure.
And they can only see so much at a time. It is we that need to start speaking in our subtone, in our subtext, and even overtly to ourselves and our brothers that let this pipeline be so that the nation can develop. If we cannot get that message to the grassroots, a lot of what we are going to be saying in terms of security will be highfalutin, they will sound nice, but they will achieve nothing.
This will be a good place to end our conversation. Ola Bode Showumi, member African Business Roundtable, consultant to the House Committee on Power, as well as the Senate Committee on Gas. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on our program. It's been quite insightful. I mean, listening to you. I mean, thank you so much indeed.
It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure.